Heath is stupid good at Smash Brothers. I mean, to be honest, Heath is stupid good at any competitive thing that he's done more than 3 times. But even compared to how good Heath is at shit, he's good at Smash Brothers. So years ago, when Eli was just an acquaintance, he gets in a conversation with Heath and reveals that he, too, is stupid good at Smash Brothers. In fact, he confessed that he barely played the game anymore since it had been years since anybody could give him a real challenge. Needless to say, Heath was excited he issued such a challenge, and Eli reluctantly agreed to come out of retirement and teach him a lesson or two. Now, it's New York City. It takes at least an hour to get from anywhere to anywhere, so it takes a while for him to find a time when Heath's going to be off of work and Eli's going to be off of work, and they can all get together in one place. So for a couple of weeks, the shit talk just keeps escalating. Heath is cautiously optimistic about his chances, and Eli is a wall of confidence. Eli's friends keep slipping shit into conversation with Heath about how incredible he is at video games, especially Smash Brothers. They caution him not to get too excited, as Eli may very well be the best video game player in the known universe, and Smash Brothers may just be his best game. But never one to back down from a challenge, Heath presses forward, and after a couple of weeks of WrestleMania levels of vituperation, the day finally arrives. And by now, it's a huge thing, right? Everybody who works in this store is all excited about it. Heath and I lived in a house in Queens with a bunch of roommates. It was kind of a hangout house to begin with, so when the two of them sat down for the match, there's at least a dozen people crowded in to get a glimpse of this long-anticipated brawl. And 18 seconds later, it's over because Eli wasn't actually good at Smash Brothers or video games in general, really. And it's not like he thought he was good and then Heath taught him otherwise. He'd just been fucking with Heath the whole time. He was cashing in favors with friends to get him to talk up his video game skills. So Heath just beat his ass 6 matches in a row or something, and they sat there like Geraldo in Al Capone's vault until Eli broke out laughing and admitted he'd only played the game maybe a half a dozen times before. Heath had been training for this. He'd been playing for hours a night just to make sure his skills were in top form for this bout. He'd damn near written a will, and it was for nothing. He probably could have won if he'd only been allowed to put one hand on the controller. And sure, he bested his opponent, but the look on his face sure wasn't victorious. And as idiosyncratic as that story is, I think it represents a pretty universal emotion shared by any well-read atheist that ever found themselves in any argument in real life with a theist. Right? You come in there, you get your biblical references, your epistemological constructs, your philosophical argumentation, your practice refutations for presuppositionalism, the morality arguments, appeals to historicity, and then they say they believe in God because archaeologists done found Noah's Ark. Like seriously, sans the mispronunciation, I've actually gotten that argument. Consider for a second how ridiculously bad that argument is. First of all, just no, right? Just not a true statement. But even if it was, it wouldn't prove God's existence. It wouldn't even be evidence for God's existence. Hell, since the Ark story predates the biblical version, it wouldn't even be evidence for Noah's existence. But they saw a headline in the National Enquirer while they were checking out at the Walmart claiming that somebody found Noah's Ark, and they just filed that away in their mind as proof that the Bible is true and God loves them. Right? That's a constant problem for us. I mean, if you're one of those people that thinks about shit logically and requires a coherent worldview to get through the day, you're probably going to shuck off religion on your own if it was ever there to begin with. Virtually every atheist I've ever met that started off religious eventually abandoned their faith because they realized it didn't actually make sense. Right? They tried their damnedest to pound the round peg of genocide into the square hole of a loving, omnipotent being, but ultimately they had to admit that there was no way to balance the equation without erasing God. And so, with good personal evidence of its effectiveness, they set out to persuade other believers using those same logical arguments that convinced them, only to find that they've got such a head start in the race that the other guy can't even hear him from where he is unless they shout. Right, you go out there ready to beat back the first mover argument, and they give you the tides going in and out. Now, I'm not saying there are no well-informed Christians out there. I'm just saying those aren't the ones most of us find ourselves challenged by. Right, because of my public position, I get plenty of well-informed emailers that are copying and pasting the very best apologetics their religion has to offer. But when a person I actually run into finds out I'm an atheist, I get National Enquirer headlines. Of course, if I was just saying this to belittle the intelligence of Christians, it wouldn't really be worth doing a diatribe about. I mean, I guess if I was doing that and it afforded me the chance to share that Smash Brothers story about Eli, maybe it would be. But the point is that there's a point to all this. So I get feedback sometimes from people who take us to task for dealing with the very worst in Christian argumentation. You know, come on, Ray Comfort isn't what people really believe. They'll say stuff along the lines of, look, if you really want to convince people, tackle the best arguments they have to offer. Don't straw man them with dumbass arguments from Ray Comfort and National Enquirer headlines. And that would be fair, except that we're not trying to convince anybody. If I wanted a Christian to listen to this show, I'd say fuck less. And I'd say fuck Jesus way less. What we're trying to do when we talk about apologetics here is arm our audience with the kind of rebuttals they might need in a real world conflict, the right analogies and shit to, start off on the right foot. And in the real world, you're not being asked to justify your atheism to William Lane Craig. You're being asked by that lady in the break room that has to be periodically reminded not to use the N-word. I'd venture to say that every time I've actually lost an argument about religion with a religious person, it's because I've overestimated them. They tossed out something so absurdly stupid that I just laughed at it. And after that, it didn't really matter how good my rebuttal was. I just laughed at them. So sure, arm yourself against the best they have to offer. Someday it might come in handy, but never underestimate the stupidity of religion.